turning down, I'm turning in, I'm turning on, I'm turning Japanese. I think I'm turning Japanese, I really think so. Turning Japanese, I think I'm turning Japanese, I really think so.
Hey, welcome to Half the Battle. This week we're taking a look at the G.I. Joe's Japanese Samurai Warrior. A guy that's not really Japanese. Well, sort of.
Meet Budo. His first figure from 1988 has all original body parts. And it sure looks the part, doesn't it? You know, I'm of two minds of this figure. By now, I think you know me well enough to realize that I prefer traditional, army-looking G.I. Joe figures, at least for the G.I. Joe team itself. So, personally, I'm not a huge fan of having a samurai toy thrown in there. Objectively, though, this is a cool and nice-looking figure. There are lots of nice little details, like the sculpting on his torso, the padding on his arms, and the mesh on his upper arms. He comes with a nice set of accessories. A samurai helmet that, granted, has a tuning fork on it, 2 swords, and a backpack. The only really weird bit is they gave him a sword made entirely out of red plastic, and it looks very out of place. His silver sword, though, looks much better and can even attach to his belt. It's a nice little touch. His backpack, while looking nice, does have a problem. It's far too easy to accidentally snap the pegs off where the swords slide in. Be careful with that. Overall, a very good figure with an excellent classic samurai look. It's nicely subdued and traditional.
Now we come to his second figure where all of that gets thrown right out the window. It's not good. It has orange on it. Neon orange. Again. Look, I thought we had a deal. You guys wouldn't show me anything neon orange, and I wouldn't go on a killing spree.
Here he is, folks. Just look at that wonderful get-up. Gaudy doesn't even begin to describe it. I think the thing that bugs me the most is the orange on the helmet doesn't match the more reddish tint on his belt and arms. The only part of the figure that I like is the silver color they used on the upper arms. It makes it look like he has chainmail on underneath. He still comes with a katana, but the second sword and backpack are gone from this version. Yeah, I don't like this color scheme, but hey, maybe it was actually historically accurate or something.
I have notes. Let me just quote you something I found online regarding samurai clothing. Exceptionally bright colors and outlandish patterns were typically avoided or sneered upon as a show of immodesty or conceit.
Yeah, way to go there, Budo, buddy.
Oh, but there's more. Samurai children, however, were dressed rather flamboyantly, and a more subdued appearance was one of the results of the coming-of-age ceremony.
Yeah, this guy is basically dressed as a samurai children's costume. He should be out trick-or-treating, not defending human freedom against a ruthless terrorist organization.
Budo wouldn't get another figure until 2013, when he was part of the Retaliation line.
And this is it. Wow, now that's a samurai. Talk about going overboard. This guy is very, very detailed, and his clothing has several layers. I like how there's even a natural-looking hole you can fit one of the swords in. Unfortunately, the biggest asset this figure has, his elaborate costume, is also his biggest drawback. All the pads and layers severely limit his movement, making it difficult and sometimes impossible to put him in cool poses.
So, this action figure is basically reduced to being a statue.
It goes so far that, if he's wearing his, well, coat, for lack of a better word, his helmet simply balances on the top of his head instead of fitting snugly. Speaking of his headgear, this guy has the most elaborate hat in the history of G.I. Joe. I mean, it has antlers, for God's sake. Antlers! Now, to be fair, these things were, or still are, I suppose, a thing with Japanese helmets. The antlers are called kuwagata and are just one type of decoration used on samurai helmets, which often used animal-themed motifs. It still looks ridiculous, though, whether 1,000 years ago or now. Also, if you go by the Japanese stereotype that they bow to each other a lot, yeah, those things must have taken quite a few eyes out in their time. And yeah, for this visual gag, I had to use a different figure to put the helmet on, because the one from 2013 can't actually bow because of all the clothing.
Now, let's take a look at the file cards. Well, one file card actually, and two cheap imitations.
The name Budo itself refers to Japanese martial arts. Translated, it can be either Way of War or Way of the Warrior. His last name is Gesso, and while I couldn't confirm that was actually a Japanese name, Gesso, spelled with a G, and Gesso, spelled with a Y, are actually former names for the Japanese island of Hokkaido. So his name has, at best, a casual relationship with Japan, much like the guy himself. Yeah, because this guy is from Sacramento, not Japan. He's at best 4th generation Japanese. I'd say this guy is more of a weeaboo than anything else, if not for the fact that his family did come from the samurai. His hobbies include Harley-Davidson bikes and listening to heavy metal. His second file card is the infamous one from the International Action Force that I've shown you before with Big Bear and Big Ben, so it's shared by all 4 members. The card states that Budo was sent by Japan to participate in the task force. You know, the guy from Sacramento, whose family we know has lived in the United States for 3 generations.
Bad card! No cookie!
His third and final card from 2013, well, I can just quote it to you entirely.
Again. Budo Samurai Warrior is a martial arts master and a gifted sword fighter. He wears armor used by his samurai ancestors. When Cobra ninjas attack, Budo Samurai Warrior is ready to strike with speed and skill. And that's it.
Yeah, the retaliation figures didn't actually come with file cards. They just had a short blurb on the back stating the bloody obvious. A martial arts master that uses samurai armor.
I'm so glad you told me. I never would have guessed.
I don't know why they did away with the file cards all of a sudden. All I can say is it's a real dick move. I mean, the original file cards were carefully crafted pieces of lore that often gave you a great insight in the person behind the codename, and they were written by the creator of the comic book himself. The retaliation blurb just describes the bleeding obvious and was written by whatever intern walked past the door at the point when they were designing the package.
And do you want to know the sad part? This isn't actually the worst file card out there. Oh no. The worst type of file card is actually from the European G.I. Joe vs. Cobra line.
Look at it. Just so they could save money and only use one type of packaging for the entire continent of Europe, they put literally all the languages on there, reducing the file cards to just a military specialty.
Moving on, Budo did not appear in the cartoons, since the figure came out between the end of the Sunbow run and the beginning of the Deke run.
As far as the comic goes, I could only find one issue that featured him, but it does have one of my favorite stories in it, so that's nice. He appears in issue 82, called Weeding Out. In it, we get a rare inside look in how somebody becomes a G.I. Joe. Turns out, it's a grueling elimination process that even Arlie Ermy would call a bit excessive. Budo manages to get through it though, and immediately confirms that he's a badass by taking out an entire squad of bad guys all by himself, using only his swords. And then, as far as I can tell, he disappears from the comic series entirely.
I actually don't have a problem with that. He came in, showed off what a cool guy he was to promote the toy, and left, not overstaying his welcome.
Well, that was Budo. In conclusion, well, like in so many cases, his original toy is the best. His toy from the 90s is laughable, like so many others from that time. And his homage version from 2013 is great looking, but not very movable. His comic appearance was brief, but highly enjoyable, thanks partly because he appeared in a great story.
See you next week, everybody.
You got me turning up and turning